Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are at the end of the 2026 to 2027 season, and for the third time in 5 years as GM slash coach of the Chicago Blackhawks, we are the first team out of the playoffs in the Western Conference, missing by just a point this year behind Anaheim. So that is definitely disappointing. 5 years into this playthrough, and as I mentioned, we've barely missed the playoffs 3 times, have made the playoffs twice, and did win a shocking championship one of those 2 times that we made the playoffs. So, from the perspective of already having a title, the playthrough is a success. From the perspective of missing the playoffs 3 out of the 5 years that we've been leading this team, the playthrough is a failure. So it's kind of been a very mixed bag for us and the Blackhawks thus far. One slightly positive thing that happened this season is that we did get younger, brought up several youngsters, and traded for, most notably, Jesper Wallstedt, who became our starting goalie and had a pretty good year. 34, 23, and 7, 4 shutouts, 916 save percentage, and a 273 goals against average. Our other goalie, Jakob Skarek, was 8 and 10 with a 3.06 goals against and a 911 save percentage. So I feel like we're fine at goaltender and we'll be good there if Wallstedt continues to develop. Only 24 years old. So that was progress, and as the team kind of slipped in the standings, as we got closer to the trade deadline, we did trade away a couple of older players who were in the last years of their contract that we didn't think we were going to want to bring back at the money they were looking for. So we got a few extra trade assets, but those were late round assets, as opposed to the 2 first rounders that we had to give up to bring Wallstedt on board. So we will not have a first rounder in the upcoming entry level draft. The hope would be that we end up in that 15th or 16th spot so that the pick we're giving up to Minnesota is not incredibly valuable. Taking a look at our top performers from the year, not surprisingly, Mitch Marner and Dylan Larkin were our top 2 goal scorers with 29 and 28 goals respectively. Marner also led the team with 46 assists and 75 points. Plus minus for both of them slightly negative on the year, kind of documents how weak our team was. Left defenseman Quinn Hughes, another nice year, 18 goals, 36 assists. Bo Horvat has not produced the way that we would have hoped offensively. 13 goals, 38 assists. Gavin Hayes, the youngster, had a nice year, 15 goals and 31 assists. Shocking numbers from right defenseman Sam Rinzel, who went right from the NCAA to the NHL this past year and scored 19 goals as a defenseman for us. Very productive offensive player for us who can play a little bit of defense, not exceptional, but Rinzel has definitely been a nice addition to the team, one of the youngsters that I talked about. Cole Sillinger, really nice year, 17 goals, 27 assists, but plus 25 on the season. We've signed the 23-year-old to an extension. Victor Eklund, guy we drafted in the first round a couple seasons ago, had a nice rookie year. Only played 63 games because of some injuries, but 17 goals, 26 assists. Alex Formenton, 14 goals, 22 assists. Another youngster, Frank Nazar, 11 goals and 25 assists, similar to Rinzel, came right out of college into the NHL, and he played every game for us this year. I think Nazar was the only player on the team who played every game, so hopefully he will continue getting better. Travis Konechny, kind of a disappointing year given what we're paying him, just 34 points. Kevin Korchinski, young defenseman, second season, continued to be a useful player for us. Nathan Villeneuve, another one of the youngsters. I believe he was a second-round draft pick the year that after we won the Stanley Cup. Pick number 64 in the second round back in 2024, right after we won that shocking Stanley Cup. 11 goals in 48 games, similar to Mr. Eklund. Villeneuve also suffered some injuries, but still got playing time as he moved right from the OHL to the NHL. Lauri Paganaimi made a trade with the Rangers last year, scored 15 goals in 51 games. Paul Cotter, a guy who does a lot of the dirty work, only 23 points, but was +4 on the season. Rasmus Andersson, a bit of a disappointing season for the 30-year-old, given what we're paying him, 3 goals, 20 assists. When we traded away one of our veteran defensemen, got back Tobias Bjornfot in return. May have a role with the team, played only 4 games for us, though he was kind of our 7th defenseman for most of the time that he was with us. That was because we brought Matteo Rotundi up about midway through the season. You can see he played both 32 games in both the AHL and the NHL this past season, was +12 at the NHL level, so he was our first-round draft pick, number 20 overall in our first draft in 2023 with the Blackhawks. Was actually the second of our 2 number 1 picks, but he has made the NHL now and looks to hopefully be with us for a long time to come. And then David Jaracek is a guy who we picked up off of waivers, another young blue liner, only 10 points on the year. He, like Bjornfot, is probably 6th, 7th defenseman on the team next year, but we do feel we do have some good depth there. Dylan Holloway, a guy we're probably going to be moving on from -4 in 39 games. Noel Acciari, we had to pick up at the trade deadline after we traded away a few players. Notably, Gustav Forsling was the defenseman that I mentioned that we traded away. And then we also traded away Kunin, who had been a forward for us for a few years. We were actually under the salary limit, so we had to make a trade for a mediocre veteran who was making a decent amount of money, and Acciari was the player. You can see he only played 2 games for us after playing 3 for Boston. And then Skarek and Wallstat, who we've obviously already talked about, in goal for us. So feel like we've got the core of a good team, and do like the fact that we have a much more youthful team before. Acciari won't be back. Going to have to figure out what to do with Bo Horvat, making pretty good money at over $6 million a year, and he just has not turned into the dynamic offensive player that we thought we were getting when we traded for him before the trade deadline. Back in our first season as GM of this team, we got 13 goals in 19 games from him, 23 points total. Felt that it was going to work out really well. And then you can see since then, 23, 13, 20, and 13 goals. A couple of injury-plagued seasons in there, but certainly has not been the player that we hoped we would be getting. Really, his best season as a professional was the year that he split between us and Vancouver, when he scored 82 points in 80 games. Year before, he had 59 goals in 61 games. So he's been close to that, I guess, back in the season before last, when he had 54 goals in 59 games. But for the money we're paying him, we're expecting him to be a little more dynamic offensively. And then Dylan Larkin, one of our top offensive players who has had injury issues the last couple years, Rasmus Andersson, and the somewhat disappointing Travis Konechny are the only other players on our team on the wrong side of 30 at this point. We are in a pretty good situation as far as our cap obligations for next year. Mentioned Acciari coming off the books, not going to re-sign Dylan Holloway. Gavin Hayes will be getting a big raise, as will Cole Sillinger, but good to have both of those pretty exciting young players back with us. Quinn Hughes also going to be getting a nice raise as we re-signed him. That being said, you can see our total cap obligations are still only about $62 million. So we will have the ability to be big players this coming off season if there are big time players out there to sign in free agency. Taking a look at upcoming free agents, there are potentially some guys you would think that all of these youngsters will end up being signed before they actually hit free agency. But definitely some guys with some pretty good ability and some pretty good potential who could be out there. Hopefully help us move this franchise in a more consistently favorable direction than we've been able to lead them thus far during this playthrough. And taking a look at the expanded standings in the Western Conference, once again, scoring goals, a bit of a problem for us. We outscored only one playoff team, the Dallas Stars, but we remain a pretty good defensive team. Our 242 goals allowed were better than every team in the Western Conference except for the Mighty Flames. So we were plus 21 in terms of our goal differential. That's better than three of the teams that beat us into the playoffs. On paper, I think we're a better team and we are a playoff team, but we didn't achieve that this year. And to paraphrase a famous football coach named Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are, and we are not a playoff team. But I'm pretty happy with our goaltending and defense. If we can find some big-time offensive player in free agency, that would clearly be a logical path for us to pursue, given that we have limited draft capital right now, losing our number one this season and our number one next year. Free agency is going to be the most logical path for us to improve this team. And as I mentioned, we will have some money to spend this offseason. So I think that maybe layering in a couple of big-time free agents with some of the young talent that we've started to develop can hopefully propel these Blackhawks to greater heights next season. And not surprisingly for a disappointing season, but we don't have any nominees for any of the big awards. Thought we might have a chance at a Calder Trophy, but not to be the case. Looks like some youngsters had some pretty good years. Yeah, Matthew Soto with 30 goals for the Senators. Michael Haig with 24 goals and 34 assists for the Rangers. As good a season as some of our youngsters had. Not quite that good. So it will be a barren trophy cabinet for the Blackhawks this year, not just on the important Stanley Cup kind of level, but also in terms of the individual awards in the National Hockey League. And the development report for the Blackhawks for the month of April is still pretty favorable. A lot of the young players that I mentioned, especially the defensemen, Jarachik, Korchinski, and Rotundi, continuing to improve. Nazar also improved. Down in the minors or down in their junior and club teams, also some progress from some of the players that we have rights to. Thinking more broadly about next season, kind of mentioned the players who are already on the NHL roster, but there are a few other players who could be coming soon. Luke Coughlin is a guy who we actually drafted ahead of Rotundi in our first draft in 2023. Picked him number 16 overall, I believe, and then we got Rotundi at 20. 16 overall when we, as I mentioned earlier, that was the first of the three times that we were the team that most was closest to the playoffs without getting in when we drafted 16th that year and just missed the playoffs. But certainly Coughlin has potential to hopefully help our blue line this upcoming season. Don't know that Linus Eriksson is quite ready yet, although he did score 43 points in 38 games last season, so he could be getting closer. Goalie Drew Comesso probably is ready at this point. I just don't know if we have an obvious spot for him on the team with the likes of Wallstedt and Skarek ahead of him, but he could be helping us in the not so distant future. Mathis Dubé split last year between the ECHL and then we promoted him to the AHL. Suffered some injuries, or else we might have brought him up. Ryan Green was up a little bit for us, 17 games, scored 5 points. So there is some other talent that is potentially on the way with us. And then there's also some pretty significant unsigned talent that's getting close. Most notably, Xavier Veilleux was in Hartford in the NCAA or Harvard, not Hartford, in the NCAA this past year. I guess he still can have 1 year left in college. It looks like he's been playing for the Crimson for 3 years, but he also looks like he is probably pretty close to being able to contribute at the NHL level, given that he's another defenseman, and we're pretty rich in defensemen, particularly left defensemen. May keep him in college if he wants to for another year. But you can see with Boisvert, Mays, Chung, and Forget, have some players who we think have pretty decent potential that we have drafted or acquired the rights for by other means in recent years. And the playoffs are moving steadily along. We're down to our final 4 teams. Dallas is going to be taking on Calgary in the Western Conference Finals. Calgary, as you may remember from our last episode, was the dominant team in the NHL this year. 58 wins and 118 points. Both figures easily the best in the league. And they'll be going up against a Dallas team that was only 4 points better than us, but they were better than us this past season. Over in the Eastern Conference, it's going to be Florida and Carolina. Florida had 97 points. Carolina, with 105 points, was the second best team in the Eastern Conference. So even though they are both second seeds, you would have to think that Carolina would be favored over Florida. And Calgary would certainly be expected to get by the Stars into the Stanley Cup Finals. And my advanced prognostication skills proved to be quite accurate, with the Hurricanes taking out Florida in a 4-game sweep. Calgary did get past Dallas. It was a much tougher series. Went 7 games. Calgary won 4-3. They fell down 2-0 in the series, tied it up at 2-2, and then fell down 3-2 before winning the last 2 games of the series. So a lot of road wins in that series, but Calgary with the best record in hockey, and Carolina with the second best record in the Eastern Conference will be meeting in the Stanley Cup playoffs to see who takes over for Colorado as the champions, as Colorado got bounced by the Stars in the first round. One other stat to check in on as we kind of get closer to the off season. Blackhawks, once again, really good attendance, highest home average. 36 out of our 41 games were sold out. We have expanded the United Center over the last couple years, and we also raised prices this past season. So the fact that we still sold out almost every game has us in pretty good financial position right now. Despite the fact that our fans are very upset with us and don't like us very much, ownership does like us, probably because we're helping him make so much money by convincing people to come and watch a team that has underperformed on the ice. but we're in a really good situation. We've been generating a lot of points, selling a lot of ticket revenue with the expanded United Center. And we also do have a project underway to build a new United Center, which we'll have in a few years. So that will be an even bigger step in the right direction in terms of generating more and more money for Rocky Wirtz, and hopefully hopefully he will then allow us to keep our job long enough to win another title. And the Blackhawks have given us an extension, not exactly a rousing endorsement. They've decided we have been doing okay and renewed our contract, but at least we will be back for another season. Looks like another 3 years, although that'll be 2 years once the calendar year or the salary year for the NHL flips over in about 3.5 weeks when we get into July. And the plucky Carolina Hurricanes won their second championship here in 2027, 21 years after their first title. Swept the Blue Jackets, won a hard-fought 7-game series against the Devils after going down 3-2. Swept the Panthers, as we recently talked about, and then they took out the Mighty Flames 4-2, including a 5-0 victory in the deciding Game 6 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So the Hurricanes are your Stanley Cup champions. And as we prepare for the upcoming offseason, as I mentioned, we've either re-signed or traded away most of our players who were in the final year of their contract at the NHL level. Acciari, not going to bring back. He's old and not all that good. Holloway, we'll check in with him one last time. I think he's probably making more money or asking for more money than we're going to want to pay him. But we will at least find out. Yeah, he's looking for almost $4.5 million. I don't think he's worth that. We do have the auto qualify on, so if someone makes him an offer, he's a restricted free agent and we can potentially match it. But definitely not a player that we feel we need to sign before we let him hit the open market. And kind of interesting that Luke Kunin, who I had mentioned we traded away the Capitals, is going to be an open free agent. So we didn't get a ton for him. I can't remember exactly what it was. We got Bjorn Fott. That's right. We got Bjorn Fott from him. And then when we traded away Gustav Forsling, that's where we got a draft pick back, and not a particularly high one. So if we want Kunin back, he'll be on the open market. I don't know that we really will. And it looks like Forsling is also going to be a free agent. We had gotten a 6th rounder when we dumped him, so it's kind of the best case scenario for us. I don't know if, given their age and mediocre-ish production from both of them, whether either will be on our list to bring back, but kind of a best case scenario for us where we got a small amount of assets for each of them, and we'll still have the opportunity to look at them on the open market this offseason if we so decide. And as we get closer to July, we do have a handful of former draftees, Brigley, Delinsky, Levesque, and Newman, that we need to make a decision on. You can see they were all 6th and 7th round picks. Not sure that we're really going to chase after any of them, but we'll at least take a quick look at their ability and potential. And you can see they're kind of down the list. Brigley, we think, is a 2.5-star potential guy. Levesque, similar, think he's 2.5-star potential. And I've already forgotten the names of the 2 other guys. Newman and Delinsky. I don't think either of them were incredible in terms of their potential. Newman, we think, also 2.5-star potential, and Delinsky the same. So Delinsky, I mean, their organizational depth, I don't think any of them are going to become big time players for us. But we also are in a situation right now where we only have 39 players signed to contracts, so we do have the opportunity to bring on a little bit of depth for the team and the organization. So we may end up making offers to, I guess, theoretically all of those guys. I don't think any of them are ultimately difference makers, but we've got room to bring them on board and see if maybe our scouts are a little bit off. Again, they're 6th and 7th round guys, as we talked about. So unlikely that any of them are really going to develop into big time players. But as I said, we've got the ability to bring them all on board with entry level contracts. So we will go ahead and do that. And who knows, maybe one of them becomes a useful player who can contribute for us down the line. At the very least, it gives our front line a little bit of depth. Wouldn't feel great if we had to have these players on the NHL roster, but we have been in a situation with injuries over the last couple of years at times when we've really been struggling to just kind of find someone who even knows how to skate to kind of fill that 23rd spot on our roster and maybe play a game every couple weeks. So having these guys in the ECHL and the AHL under contract will at least give us a little more flexibility for the back end of our NHL team if we have a bunch of injuries. And as I said, I don't expect any of them to turn into anything too useful at the NHL level, but you never know. It's a few more lottery tickets for us. And given that we have given up that top draft capital to bring Wallstat on board, might as well take a shot on some of these guys we drafted in the past. And not surprisingly, Delinsky has already signed his contract. Presumably we'll hear from Levesque, Newman, and Brigley shortly. For the time being, I don't think we want to loan him out. He's already 20 years old. We'll end up putting him, I think, in the ECHL to start out. Looking at the free agency preview, not going to be much that we're losing. Jason Dickinson, who ended up in the minors for us at 31 years old, and Acciari are the only guys, because Holloway, as we've talked about, is a restricted free agent. So we're not going to have a lot to lose. Luke Kunin is mentioned as one of the big-time potential free agents, so that's probably not a great sign for us. Marty Natchez is a guy we had thought about trading for in the past. Getting a little older, but he may be an interesting guy for us to bring to help us out on the wing. We will find out shortly who's actually going to be available when we get to July. And as I mentioned, no major awards or no awards at all for members of the Blackhawks this year. Looks like Calgary could be a real tough team for the future. They've got Connor Bedard, MVP, as well as Rookie of the Year goalie and Dustin Wolf. So although they did fall short in the Stanley Cup Finals, figure that is going to be a pretty difficult team to deal with in the West for the next several seasons. So we know that we're going to have to get better to be competing with the likes of the Flames. And we did get one honor with Sam Rinzel being named all-rookie defenseman. We already talked about him. 19 goals from a rookie blue liner is pretty impressive, especially a player who went right from the NCAA to the NHL this year. So feel real good to have him on board, and hopefully we can add some talent to join him that is as prolific a offensive player as he is in the coming weeks. And another very mediocre season is in the books. We had a winning season, but we failed to win the playoffs. Didn't get any points for anything else. So only an 11 for our season score. So that was pretty brutal. Only 2 available points. We mentioned last year that we had kind of forgotten that we were not only playing as the GM, but also playing as the head coach. So we added the 2 points we had got last year into the head coach ratings. We're going to focus a little more on the GM this time, bump up our self preservation a little bit, and bump up our negotiating skill. Hopefully, we'll have a big year one of these seasons so we can really get a more broad and more significant improvement of our ratings, but it's been very slow going in terms of our development thus far. And during the off season, Alex Ovechkin has decided to retire, so he retires with 953 career goals. So he got past Gretzky in this game, just like he probably will get past Gretzky in real life. And probably not surprisingly, Noel Acciari, who played in just that handful of games for us after we picked him up from Boston, has also decided to retire. Looking at our development of reports, older players, Bo Horvat and Jason Dickinson, both kind of moving in the wrong direction, but that is to be expected on the wrong side of 30. And Rocky Wirtz remains satisfied with how we did this past season. Most of our fans are calling for us to be fired, but he says there's no need to worry about our job. Replacing us is out of the question. I guess that's the benefit from filling the seats and making a lot of money and renovating the stadium and also having a Stanley Cup title on our resume. But he is pleased with us. But the fans are not right now. We're going to need a good season on the ice to turn the fans around and get them supporting our tenure as GM and coach. And we also got hit with a few retirements on our staff. Jeff Ward, coach, and scouts Pierre Mondu and Rick Prudden have retired. So a few gaps on our staff that we'll look to fill also. And taking a look at our annual budget here on July 1st, aren't going to raise ticket prices again this year after missing the playoffs. We'll keep them at $120. Going to do normal maintenance on the United Center. You can see our completion date is still 2 years away for the old school sports arena. Keep the wage budget normal. Player development we're going to maximize, and we've got the money to spend, so we're going to do a very heavy marketing spend. Hopefully that will allow us during the season to maybe invest a little bit less in terms of what we are spending on marketing and advertising and getting people into the seats during the season. But so might be able to probably just spend the minimal 2 points in terms of game promotions and arena operations during the season. Going to keep morale and game promotions lower right now since the players are all off enjoying their summers and we don't have any games. Going to keep scouting full. We can afford to do it at this point with all of the revenue that we're generating. So kind of a uneventful decision-making process, in my opinion, as far as what we're doing this off season. And taking a look at our roster here on July 1st, 2027, salary less than $64 million, even with some of those increases that have gone through for the players we re-signed last year to extensions. So we have got a lot of money to spend to hopefully improve this team in the off season. Kind of weird that Will Shields is available, 21-year-old. Looks like he was a third round pick by Toronto back in 2024, and they never signed him. He was in camp with them. I have to decide whether it's appropriate to pick him up or not. If he was a first or second round pick, I would definitely feel it was just a bug in the game. I mean, I guess it still kind of is that he's out there. Although maybe is he a restricted free agent? No, he's just looking for a entry level contract, which apparently Toronto never offered to him. Have to give some thought whether I should go after him or just let him sit. You can see the top players who are available is a few of the guys that we've already talked about. Our former player Kunin, Marty Necas, Yegor Sharangovich, Sean Dursey, and Anthony Bavillier. So some guys who could definitely help our offense and our front line are out there. Also a couple more young players in terms of Christopher Brown and Ross Campbell. Where were they drafted in the past? Yeah, Christopher Brown was a third round pick, but he probably should have been signed by the Sabres. And Ross Campbell was a fourth round pick. So I don't know. It's not as an obvious a glitch as you see sometimes, where guys who are drafted fourth overall somehow end up as free agents, but you would still think that the teams would want to have signed those guys. So a few older forwards are available to us. Nobody game changing. Necas, as one of the youngest among them at the age of 28, might be interesting. Dursey also. Have to decide whether we want to pursue any of them. Taking a look at the trade block, there's a few guys out there also. We probably don't have the assets to go after any of these big time players on the trade block, but certainly a defenseman like Ty Smith could help us. So we've got a lot of things to think about as we prepare for our next episode in terms of who we may look to bring on board. A little unfortunate that there's no obvious franchise player available this year. That would clearly be something that we could really use. Our old buddy Drew Comesso is now a free agent too after spending the last couple years in the AHL. I didn't realize he was out there also. As we've talked about in the past, I think he's a decent goaltender with some potential, but right now I don't mind our goaltending situation with the young Wallstedt as well as Skarek as his backup. So a lot of decisions to make as far as free agency, and you can also see we've got a lot of players in the last year of their contract now that we're going to need to start thinking about. So going to be some big decisions at the beginning of free agency, which we'll tackle in our next episode. If you've got any thoughts on how we should proceed, definitely would love to hear them down below in the comments. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.